Pastor, last year I recall reading an op-ed that you wrote where you basically touted the infrastructure plan from the Biden-Harris administration in the context of wanting to strengthen Detroit's super information highway, essentially, to provide better access to the digital divide and to lessen that. Should we interpret your allowance of Donald Trump and your sort of, I want to call it adulation, but support of him at least coming to your church as switching sides in terms of your political allegiance?
Well, I don't have a political allegiance. My allegiance is to Jesus. I don't worship a donkey. I don't worship an elephant. I worship the Lamb of God that was slain for the sins of the world. And anybody that can come to his house, be prayed over, they are more than welcome. Obviously, I'm excited about what our current president did as it pertains to the digital divide, because he's helping our community. And I was so excited that President Trump actually physically came to 48227, a place where women are human trafficked right now as we speak, a place where our kids can't read, write, nor do math, a place that people are hurting. I was so excited to see the president there.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the mainstream liberal media and their continued outrage over a black church in Detroit hosting former President Trump to discuss the issues. Okay, you would think that this would be non-controversial considering how Biden has went to a black church to discuss issues, right? In the mainstream liberal media, they didn't find anything wrong with it. Also, this so-called black church that Biden was at had mostly white people in the crowd. But when it comes to this black church in Detroit that hosted an event for Trump and you had some white people in the crowd, all of a sudden these people want to question the authenticity of that church and to try to smear the pastor and, again, the church as a whole for hosting former President Trump. People like Joy Reid.
What a nice welcome. Thank you.
The Detroit Free Press even ran a photo series online with the headline, "Trump Visits Detroit Church to Woo Black Voters." But what they somehow forgot to show was how overwhelmingly white that crowd was, and also how many empty seats there were in that sanctuary. In fact, if you looked at the carefully selected images in their online story, you would probably guess the crowd inside that sanctuary was overwhelmingly black and pro-Trump, literally cheering for him and chanting his name. And you would be forgiven for believing that this reinforces what seems to be the new hot narrative, that it is black people, specifically black men, who are driving Trump back into the White House with their overwhelming and historically growing support. When the actual reality that you can see with your own eyes and know if you peel back the layers just a little bit is that Trump spoke to an overwhelmingly white crowd inside a large Detroit church that, yes, does indeed have a black pastor, but which merely served as a venue. And that the people who participated in the roundtable, like those in the audience at that church, were already Trump supporters, not some new historic black supporters of Trump. The church where Trump held this town hall is called 180 Church. The pastor, Lorenzo Sewell, is a Detroit native who grew up in an abusive home, with his father going to prison when he was a teenager. His experience with the criminal justice system did not happen when he was already rich and famous. He became a drug dealer and gang member as a troubled kid, the way it tragically happens for so many Americans in communities with high rates of poverty. But he had a conversion experience his senior year in high school in 1999, according to his church bio, and later became a pastor. Here he is, claiming Biden and Obama never visited the hood.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
This is the part where I point out that President Obama came to Michigan 15 times as president, including Detroit. Pastor Sewell also claimed it's hard to find a black barber in Detroit for his Blasian kids, which honestly was weird.
All right, guys, so you've seen that, you heard that, okay? The mainstream liberal media has been criticizing the church of Detroit that hosted Trump for an event to talk about politics and what Trump can do for the community of Detroit. Apparently, this is a controversial thing. This is a bad thing for a black church to host a Republican and to actually talk with a Republican. And the 180 Church of Detroit has gotten a whole lot of backlash from the media for hosting Trump. So I decided that I would bring the pastor, Lorenzo Sewell, to talk about what actually happened at the church that day and how this all kind of came about, because he's receiving a lot of media criticism for essentially allowing Trump to speak to the Black community. So without further ado, I want to introduce Pastor Lorenzo Sewell, who is going to tell us kind of how they got Trump to come to this church in the first place.
I'm so grateful, man. So Hippopotamus, happy to be here with you, Greg. I mean, what you're doing, your audience, I am so blessed that a man that looks like you is opening the minds of Black people, specifically those who have had the stronghold of the Democratic Party on their minds for so long. Can you imagine 2 weeks ago, a kid born and raised on the east side of Detroit, mentored by murderers, student of the street, get a call from the Trump campaign that they want to come to the hood, right? I mean, you got the hood, and then you got the hood, right? You got like women walking around selling themselves. You got like people addicted, cross-addicted for generations, right? I mean, we give out $14.1 million of resources for the last 4 years in partnership with United Way, because we are in a context where kids can't read, write, do math. I mean, we haven't had a new home built in over 20 years in our. So for Donald Trump to call me, I thought it was a joke, right? I thought Ashton Kutcher was walking out like you're being punked type of thing. And when they called, and that wasn't the part that resonated that they called, right? I understand it's a political season. The part that resonated is the campaign made it very clear that they wanted people from their community there. So the day that it got approved, which was that Monday, I taught the church about praying for our leaders on that Sunday, which I thank God for 180 Church. We are a praying church. After it got approved, Greg, the first thing I did was I went to city council. First thing I did, because I am the head of my clergy caucus. So I went to city council, told them that they would be coming, told them that they were invited, and we went to the methadone clinic, Greg, and we began to knock on doors and begin to tell people that they would come. And the type of people we saw in the audience, the type of people that are in 48227, that have been living there, some of them for 40 years. They were so excited that the president came and had a conversation with them.
Yeah, I think that story is important because, again, the media here is trying to twist kind of what happened to try to say, well, it was staged. Okay, they try to say what happened when Trump held the Bronx rally. They try to say, well, that was staged, right? So-called people of color. There's no way they could actually show up for Trump, a Republican. And it's like, well, if you actually look at the video, you saw there was a lot of people there. It was diverse, right? And usually these individuals love diversity, except they don't really like diversity in the Black church when it comes to white people and also people from the community as well, too, coming together to basically try to hear the president of the United States, the former president of the United States, who's running for re-election. Now, again, the criticism is that there were white people in the church. Were those people from the community, or were they people who just kind of heard about it? They came from out of town. Like, what is your take? What is your response to people criticizing the church because it was too white?
You know, this is so interesting, right? You alluded to it. When it's diversity, inclusion, and equity, and when the people of God are gathering together in the church, even if you hate Trump for him to be in the church, the only person that wouldn't want him in the church is the devil. The only person that wouldn't want Black and white gathering together is the devil. The white people that were there were volunteers. Then the press. So for all the pastors out there that have had a president in your church, you know what it takes, right? For all the people that have had a president gather together in your church, let me explain to you how it happens. The first group is the Secret Service. And there are a very small niche group that have already been clear, people like me, my wife, and others that are able to be there. Then the media comes in. So what the media did was, after the Secret Service, after the volunteers, the media came in, Greg, and what did they do? They started taking pictures, right? It created a narrative that says what? There were only white people.
Yep.
But what about the rappers from Detroit that were there? What about people, Black people that were physically there? Why didn't the media just walk up to them and ask them the same question that they're trying to portray? Why didn't they just walk up to them and say, what? Aren't you disappointed with there not being enough Black people? They couldn't do that because there were a significant group. I would say about 60 to 70% of those that gathered there were not only from Detroit, but they were Black.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, specifically certain media figures like Joy Reid, which is funny to me because like your parents are immigrants, like, and you try to pretend like you have this connection to Jim Crow and to slavery and to the black church. It's like you really don't have that connection. Okay. You're a black lady wearing a blonde wig. But you're trying to get question, which I think is cultural appropriation, by the way, but you're trying to question the authenticity, the blackness of a church because there was a diversity of people there. Okay. And they try to discount the rappers. It's, oh, well, they're no-name rappers. They did the same thing when it comes to the Bronx rally in New York City. There was a lot of people there, like actual rappers and stuff like that, people from that community. And it was like, oh, well, they're no name. Nobody knows who they are, right? Apparently, it only matters if you're like Democrats, you can get Hollywood celebrities to show up to your fundraisers, right? The big names, right? Little guys don't really matter. I think it really shows the elitism in the Democrat Party and in the media as well, too. So I'm glad that you kind of cleared that up. Because that is a narrative that's being put out there that I think is unfortunate, that people are trying to racialize the house of God, right? Like, I think that faith should be colorblind. Religion is for everybody. And I don't think it's, again, for a certain, skin color or whatever, but this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to question the authenticity of the church just because of some racial dynamics. But what I really want to ask you about is what Trump actually said. Like, is there anything specific about his agenda that stood out to you in regards to what he talked about at the church?
Oh, the number one thing that he did for us is, number one, he was present. Number two, he began to highlight how people of color typically lose jobs when people of other, what we would call middlemen minorities, come into our communities. And when I say black communities, I'm talking about black communities that are in poverty. I understand that there are black communities in other parts of our nation that are more affluent. I'm not talking about those type of black people. I'm talking about black people that when you drive up to a gas station, you don't know if you might get shot.
Yeah.
Those are the contexts our church serves in. So Joy Reid and, Roland Martin and, limousine liberals where their kids go to private school and they're, they live in gated communities. That's not the type of black people I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about black people in Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw. Black people that, quite frankly, our mayor had said he'll never develop communities like ours. Our white mayor said that would never happen. I'm talking about those particular communities. President Donald Trump, he sat there and he said, you're going to be hurt because those who come in across our borders, and I'm seeing it, Greg, this isn't something I'm guessing or I'm looking at on Fox.
Yeah.
No, I have people from Venezuela that come to my church that we give money to. I'm going to be very transparent with you. And they are not documented. Now, I'm a pastor. I'm showing the love of God because that's my job. But at the end of the day, the practical reality is what? Those jobs are going to be taken away from my community because of those who have crossed this country illegally. And let me go a little further. We serve the city of Pontiac. 20% of the city is Latino. Out of those Latino Americans, most of them are very upset that people are coming in, taking their jobs because they have not gone through the process. So what's my point? That's what the president was doing. He was sitting down, having real conversations with real people of color who are in a situation that is impoverished. Not only that, so let me say there's another aspect of this that I would really say it's more of, I would say, soft skills. It's a part of, I believe, his New Yorkism, so to speak. He was not socially awkward around black folks. Now, look, Greg, I deal with a lot of white. I deal with a lot of PUIs, primarily white institutions, right?
Yeah.
I have older white men that when they get around black folk, they get weird, right? They get awkward, right?
Like Biden, like Joe Biden, for example.
It gets weird, right?
I'm just saying. We have video evidence, okay? Did you see the Juneteenth concert at the White House?
It just gets right. So you got to picture this. President Trump is done speaking. He stands up. The stage gets rushed. Remember, you had 100 black people on the stage, right?
Yeah.
So the stage gets rushed. People start throwing, hats, memorabilia, all types of stuff. He signs everything that was given to him.
Mm-hmm.
Then he says to me, I want to talk to the pastor. I want to see the pastor. Then he says, listen, I have never had anybody pray for me like that. Do you know how humbling that is as a man of God?
Yeah.
Do you know how humbling that is that the Bible says we should be praying for our leaders and it pleases God because God wants everybody to be saved in 1 Timothy chapter number 2, verses number 1 through 4? Like, that's important to me. And for him to say that, I believe it's apropos of his heart, wanting to feel loved by everybody and wanting to love all Americans. Because remember, the dude doesn't have to do this, right? He's worth $6.7 billion.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that really does say something about, the fact that, this is not just for his own personal financial gain, obviously, because he has enough of that. I'm not sure exactly why the guy doesn't just retire and live his life, right? But, hey, he still wants to be president of the United States. And I think that a lot of people waking up to what's happening in this country, and specifically when you talk about immigration in the Black community, it's not just in the Black community either. I mean, you also have Hispanics too, who also want something done in regards to being tougher on immigration, and for good reason. A lot of people come in this country legally. They have to wait and go through the process, and they don't want people coming in after them that didn't have to go through that same process. So I 100% understand where Hispanics are coming from. I understand where Black people are coming from. I just wish that Black people would have realized this a long time ago before having the border be wide open, thanks to the Biden administration. And now you have these illegal immigrants being flooded into these communities, mainly Black communities. And now all of a sudden, there are people waking up and realizing, okay, it's not racist and xenophobic to say the border should be secure. So, I think that what you bring up here in regards to the immigration policy, I think is important. I think that is going to play well. I think that's part of the reason why Trump is getting the surge that he is in Black support, at least according to the polls. We'll have to see on election day in terms of what happens. But I'm just happy that you were able to give us some insight on what happened that day and kind of push through some of the narratives that are being pushed by the mainstream liberal media. So I want to thank you for coming on. You can go ahead and have the last word, let everybody know more about your church and anything that you want to kind of say, and then we can close it out.
I think it's very important. If you're a Black American out there, right, do your research. 1854, there was a group of patriots that rose up that wanted to go against the Kansas and Nevada Act to expand slavery. They're called the Republican Party. I would ask every Black American to do your research. Look at Frederick Douglass. Look at his relationship with Abraham Lincoln. Look at men like Carver, W.E.B. Du Bois, right? Be willing to say, just because you're Black, that does not mean you need to be a Democrat. And I know it's hard, right? Socially, economically, I know it's difficult. But it would be better for you to stand up for something than just to give up for anything.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Pastor, for coming on. God bless you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, my brother. I appreciate it.